San Jose is the third largest city in California and the 10th largest city in the United States. So what's it like to be at the helm?
Someone came and pointed a gun at me during the council meetings.
The focus is on San Jose on this edition of Equal Time.
From San Jose State University, you're watching Equal Time, exploring new issues each week, giving equal time to competing points of view.
Hello from the campus of San Jose State University, and welcome to this edition of Equal Time. I'm your host, Journalism School Director Bob Rucker. When California became a state in 1850, San Jose served as the first capital. Throughout the state's history, San Jose has been on the leading edge, which brings a host of challenges. Mayors past and present sat down together at San Jose State University this spring as part of the Don Edwards Lecture Series.
I want to start the conversation by just talking a little bit about the power of the mayor in San Jose's form of government, because as we sort of trace the history of the office through U5 and also Tom McHenry, we see a big change. When Norm Mineta was elected in 1971, he was only the second elected mayor of San Jose in the 20th century. So big change. That gave him a certain power as mayor, but beyond that, Mayor Mineta had the power to preside over council meetings, 7-member council, including the mayor, all elected citywide, just like the mayor. I think your pay was $3,600 a year, Norm. Hope you're doing better than that now. And you had a staff of one or two, maybe. One. Staff of one. John Spalding, remember him well. Janet Gray Hayes became mayor, was elected in 1974. During her term in office, several big changes happened. One is a change to district council elections, so only the mayor elected at large. Also council pay, so I think your pay got bumped up to $20,000 a year when council pay started in 1980-81. And also, the council established committees, and the mayor had the power to appoint the committee. So we have a little enhancement of the power of the mayor at that point. And council got staff. And Janet Gray, you had a staff of more than one. Yes, a few. Yes. Susan Hammer becomes mayor then. And before she became mayor, when Tom McHenry was mayor, there was a charter amendment that gave the mayor the power to nominate the city manager. Council still has to appoint, but the mayor nominates. And also gave the mayor a leading role on the budget. So we had some fairly significant changes over time. Do we need to be thinking about a strong mayor form of government? And there have been proposals for this dating back to Norm's time.
So we have had years of good government through the city manager, semi-strong mayor form of government.
And we really are kind of a hybrid type of system. We're not a true council manager form of government. We're not a true strong mayor form of government, kind of a combination of those two things. My philosophy is that if you're going to be the nail that keeps getting hammered, and we all have been through that role many, many times through our terms as mayor, then you should be able to put the cabinet together. You should be able to run the city as a strong mayor form of government.
If you made a list of the well-run big cities and the poorly run big cities, you'll find there really isn't a clear argument about which form of government is the best. I think there are many other important factors, and that in California, no one gets to be in charge of anything. And so we just have to learn to work in this collaborative model of getting to 6 votes at a council meeting. And even if I were a strong mayor, I think I would still be having to work in a collaborative model. So I don't think it gains us anything. Certainly it's hard to say that there is a model that would be better than what we have, because we're generally regarded as a fairly well-run city, despite the troubles that we've had over the decades.
And there are a variety of reasons for San Jose's structural budget deficit. Proposition 13 is one, the state fiscal arrangement is one, but public employee pensions are part of that too. So you all were Chuck's predecessors as mayor. Did nobody see this coming? Why didn't anybody see this coming?
Well, you know, I can't answer that question directly except to say, you know, when I was mayor in the 90s, you know, we had plenty of money to do all sorts of good things. Redevelopment was thriving. We could build, you know, left Ron money for the city hall. We built the library with San Jose State, you know, the arena, the theater, and so no, I don't think we saw it coming.
Well, I think the other thing that happens is, you know, when you're trying to recruit, particularly when it comes to police and fire, which is an area that I don't think makes sense to be a penny wise and a pound foolish, because you have to compete with other jurisdictions. And when I was mayor, we were behind in most of the salary surveys that the staff presented to us, both in terms of pay and pension. The other thing that factored in, it's going to sound strange, but certainly 9/11, the impact on this country and the attitudes of people were very favorable to making sure that we had a well-trained police and fire service employees, and that led a lot to the benefits that were created then. You know, I often say that when 9/11 hit New York, no one really questioned how much those officers and firefighters that ran into that building were paid or how much their pensions were. And, you know, that's certainly, certainly you don't want to wish that on any community, including San Jose, but what you try to do is the best you possibly can to make sure that your employees are among the best paid, not the best paid, but certainly among the best paid, so that you are competitive with the outside workforce.
Well, Terry, 20/20 hindsight is usually pretty good. And so it's easy to look back and see all the things and decisions that were made. But, you know, that's really not been the focus of the work that I'm doing. I'm just dealing with the fact that the amount of money we're putting into pensions, retirement benefits has increased dramatically. So the auditor's done some reports. You can look at that. There's, you know, 82 different factors. But you sum it all up, and the amount of money we're paying out of our retirement plan today is 7 times greater than it was about 20 years ago. Just an enormous increase, not only in the level of benefits, but the level of payments. And so we're essentially a couple $100 million more in dollars than we were 20 years ago. So that's just a big shift in the percentage of our budgets and dollars. And without regard to how we got here, you know, my job as the mayor is just, as Ron said, you kind of take it as it comes your way because you're the mayor and you have to deal with it. And, you know, every one of my predecessors had big problems they had to deal with. This happens to be mine. And so we're dealing with it, trying to solve it so we don't pass it on to the next mayor.
So during your terms in office, we've spent $1 or $2 billion on downtown San Jose. Redevelopment agency is dead now, but that's a huge investment. Do you think we got our money's worth, and do you think we're done?
Well, no city's done. All the great ones continue to grow, and I think that'll be the case with downtown San Jose. I think every mayor here placed the downtown in its proper place. I mean, there were times when it needed more attention than other parts of the city, and each one of us, I think, try to deal with that careful balance of how much do you invest in downtown versus the neighborhoods. And but I think that the future of downtown is ready to go. I mean, when this economy does turn around in a very strong way, I think the plans are there. I think the only thing missing, Chuck, is a Major League Baseball team.
I think that every nickel that's been spent in downtown San Jose has been worth it. And all you need to do is walk out of this fine university and see the housing around here. You know, see the public buildings. You know, the tech and the arena where hopefully the Sharks are winning as we speak. You know, you could go on the addition to the museum, the rep. I mean, you could go on, and those facilities not only provide very good entertainment, but they bring thousands and thousands of people downtown every month. And you know, if you didn't have that and the parking that we spent money on, God knows. I mean, so I don't know about you out here, but I remember what downtown was like when Phil and I moved here in 1964. You know, your president is shaking his head yes too. So I think every nickel that's been spent has been well worth it, and I'll stand behind that till the day I die.
So one of the platforms that I ran on was we must make San Jose better before we make it bigger, because we were sprawling all over the countryside, and we managed to have controlled growth so that we did the infilling, and that's helped build up downtown. As a matter of fact, they were going to close the Museum of Art downtown, which is the old post office, but because of this, they were able to keep it open with a little help from some of us.
But police community relations have been a challenge in all of your terms in office. And Vice Mayor Nguyen, one of her first involvements in community politics was around a police community relations crisis, a shooting. So have we really made progress on police community relations, and why is this still plaguing us, this problem?
You know, sometimes we forget how big we are. We're a large metropolitan area. You know, 10th largest city in the country. Chuck, what are we? Just under 1 million people now. And when you have that many people living in a limited amount of space, you're going to have issues. And when you're patrolling the neighborhoods and when you're doing these kinds of things, there are going to be encounters. And I felt that, at least during the 8 years I was mayor, that our police department was on top of a lot of good things.
We have a great police department. The men and women have extremely difficult jobs. The kind of standards we set for their behavior are just enormously high, far above the standards we set for anybody else in the city. And so why do we continue to have problems? It's because we're dealing with human beings. Nobody's perfect. Our men and women aren't perfect, and our community's not perfect. But I think I'll put our department up against any other big city department in the country by any way you want to measure them, and we will come out very close to the top of the big cities. That doesn't mean we don't have a lot of work yet to do. And one of the good things about our department is the willingness not only of the chief but of the police union to work on some of these problems and some of these issues, and we have several initiatives underway to try to improve the department. But this is a problem around the country in big cities and small cities alike. It's never going to go away, because we keep getting new crops of people, new officers, new people, new kids, and it's a constant issue. But we will be the best in the country in most categories.
Well, Mayor Reed, when you think about metropolitan areas that are very large, I mean, how many homicides do we have last year? I bet it was under 20.
No, last year we had 40.
No?
It was a jump.
40?
Year before it was 20.
20? And then last year was 40?
Right, we had a spike last year.
Okay, that's 1 month in D.C. Hmm?
Yeah,
And
no,
with the 600,000
Yeah, we're still one of
population.
the safest big cities in the country.
No,
Our homicide
absolutely.
rate's very low. A lot of good things about
Just
San
up the
Jose.
road in Oakland, it's virtually like every third day.
But Terry, let me just take the opportunity to enlighten our audience about a couple of good things that happened vis-a-vis crime and gangs when I was mayor. And this isn't to toot my own horn, but it's just to say these programs are still going on today, being carried on by Mayor Gonzalez as well as Mayor Reed. And one is the Mayor's Anti-Gang Task Force, which is made up of people serving youth in both the county and the city, and a lot of cooperation between those two governments, Santa Clara County and the city of San Jose. The city put millions of dollars into youth programs and officers on the street, working at community centers, and I certainly think that that's one of the things that has kept, except for last year, which I think was very unusual in San Jose, but kept the youth violence and all lower than most cities of a lot lower than cities of our size. And the other thing was, Chuck, I don't know if it's still going, but we had much more money to do good things like this in the 90s than Mayor Reed is having to deal with today. So recognizing that, I'm not sure that this program is still going, but we had something called San Jose Best, and the city, through a variety of sources, put several $1 million a year into neighborhood centers for kids. And you know, if a child was arrested or picked up, it would go to a neighborhood center, and his parents or her parents would be called, and the child had a safe haven until the parent could come and get him or her. So, you know, there were programs like this that I think were, you know, put San Jose on the map, and it still is today, for having one of the lowest crime rates of any major city in the country. And yes, there's a problem with gangs. We don't like to see that. But it's nothing like what it would be, I think, without some of these programs that both Mayor Gonzalez and Mayor Reed were supportive of and continued in their terms.
Let me give some credit to Susan. It is the Mayor's Gang Prevention Task Force. I didn't start it. Ron didn't start it. Susan started it. We're the best in the country. We're a national model. I just was in Washington last week at the National Forum on Youth Violence Prevention. They've asked us to participate because we're a national model. We're a state model. It's something that works, and we perfected it over a couple of decades, but really Susan started it. And that's one of the great things about being on the stage with these folks is I'm really getting the benefit of lots of things that they did, because it's amazing how long some things take to do. And what you know, Ron started, I got to finish. Susan started some stuff, I get to finish. Now I'm building on all this, and sometimes it seems like nobody's thinking that far in the future, but mayors do. I think as a group, these mayors and other mayors I've met really are looking at the long term, and we have the benefit, the collective benefits of work that they've done. And to get back to an earlier question that Cherry asked about, well, why is it that we have an area that's so good at dealing with the diversity issues? And I don't know exactly why, but I know it's practically impossible to replicate. So I'm going to give credit to my fellow mayors for putting me in a position where we're the best in the world at some things, and that's one of them.
Thank you. On behalf of the four of us, Chuck, thank you very much, except that, you know, in very, very, very difficult financial times, nothing like the four of us experienced. You know, you've done a good job and have been keeping a lot of those programs going, and it hasn't been easy. And so I think you get a lot of credit for keeping San Jose one of the safest cities.
All right.
What do you want to talk about? Talk to us.
The 4 qualities of being a mayor.
Good.
4 qualities of being a mayor?
Yes, yes, go.
Yeah, go.
Okay, a supportive and understanding family,
Thank you, Ken.
knowledge of the issues, a thick skin, and strong kidneys. And I just say that, you know, being the mayor, you have a certain sense of power. And I just wanted to tell an anecdote of what happened to me when we were in the old City Hall. I went over to the Rotary Club, which was in the annex. And they stopped me at the door and they said, "Oh, I'm sorry, we don't allow women in here." And I said, "Well, all right, we'll just buy the building, or, you know." Well, we already own the building, and I said, "Well, we'll see about that." So then they let me in. So that was a great. So I just want to say also, when I went to the first time that I went to the U.S. Conference of Mayors, which was this big city mayors all around the country, I was the first woman there, and the guy next to me said, "Oh, whose secretary are you, dearie?" And I told him I was the mayor of San Jose, and that made me decide I've got to go back and get more women elected, which we did, and we got a lot of women elected. But we now have policemen at the council meetings. think I told you that's because someone came and pointed a gun at me during the council meetings. And it turned out to be a toy gun, but it certainly looked real. And I leaned forward and I just said, Mr. So-and-so, put that gun down. Put that gun down. And the city attorney and I drove under the dais at the same way, and fortunately for that. And they arrested him, and of course. But since then, they've always had a policeman present at all the city council meetings,
Right.
which you can thank me for.
You know, as I reflect on having been born and raised here in San Jose, and that was 80 years ago, and this little kid from San Jose has had opportunities that would have just glazed over the thoughts of what I might be doing as a 10-year-old or high school student. Never imagined of taking me through the trail I've been. And there were many times I'd think about that. And yet, as I reflected on all these positions I've had, including Secretary of Commerce under President Clinton, Secretary of Transportation under President George W. Bush, Mayor, Council, there's no question that the best job was Mayor of San Jose. And I remember when there was commotion by my secretary's desk. So I saddled up to the door to listen, and this person was banging on Alice Wagner's desk, saying, and I want to talk to the mayor, and I don't want to talk to anybody lower than the mayor. And that's when I stepped out from behind the door and I said, there is nobody lower than the mayor. And whatever you're here for, the answer is no. Oh, no, that's not what I meant to say, Mr. Mayor. But to me, I wish more members of Congress had the experience of people in local government, because 80% come from state government, where they've been doing the same thing they do in Congress. Vote yes, vote no. They have never been part of or being at the other end of the legislative pipeline trying to make these programs work.
Well, to me, one of the interesting things about that panel was that there was a Japanese American, one of the first Asians to be mayor of a major American city. There were two women, one of them Janet Gray Hayes, the first woman to be mayor of a major American city. There was a Latino, Ron Gonzalez. There was actually one white guy on the panel. Now, we were missing one mayor, Mayor Tom McHenry, who's white. But that's a diversity of mayors you wouldn't find in most places. And the women mayors, I think, face particular challenges. Mayor Hayes was mayor in the early days of the feminist movement and of women really emerging as a political force. But she helped lead San Jose to become what was called at the time the feminist capital of America, because other women were elected to the city council, women were elected to the county board of supervisors. One of the first women in the state assembly was elected from San Jose. So there were a lot of women elected officials on the rise. Plus, when we changed over to district elections in 1980, a majority of the council was women, and that was one of the first in the country to have a female majority. And a majority of the council were women up until about 2002, I think. So women have done really well in politics in San Jose and Silicon Valley, and Janet Gray Hayes and Susan Hammer were some of the people who broke the ground that made that possible.
Why? I mean, what's the biggest message you want students to take away from this event?
That we have a history, that diversity's been part of our history, that these political leaders all arose from the grassroots. None of these are, inherited anything. None of them are rich. None of them inherited anything from anybody in terms of a big name in politics or whatever. You know, Norm Mineta was interned as a Japanese American during World War II, and his family came back and achieved middle class economically, and eventually he gets on the council and gets elected. Mayor Hayes was basically a housewife who got involved in politics because she was trying to get a stop sign at a crossing for her kids to go to school, which is a way that a lot of women used to get started in politics before there were so many professional women. Mayor Hammer was more professional. I suppose she was very active in the community, though, as a volunteer, doing neighborhood work and public policy kinds of work, which is how I knew her way before she ran for office, and so on. So I guess one message for students is, you know, this could be you. It's these people weren't superstars. You could see that they didn't all have a massive amount of charisma. Some of them are pretty plain spoken. Really any student could do it. So a little lesson about history, a little lesson about diversity, and a little lesson about really this is a possible thing for people.
Were there any disappointments of the night where you were thinking, oh, I wish it would have gone this way, or maybe some mayors that you were just disappointed as far as answers? Or
I wasn't disappointed in any of the mayors. They all had good things to say, good stories. I was really pleased that they were all brief, because it's really hard doing a program with 5 panelists, all of whom are political leaders and could talk for the whole hour and a half. I guess we did an hour and 15 minutes. You could talk for the whole hour and 15 minutes. But they were very good about keeping their answers brief and rotating through. My biggest regret is that because there were so many members on the panel, it really wasn't feasible for me to do follow-up questions and push them a little bit. For example, I asked about the pension crisis, the budget crisis with pensions in San Jose now, and I asked, didn't anybody see this coming? And they all pretty much said, oh, well, no, but we had plenty of money when I was mayor, so yeah, it wasn't really an issue. But somebody should have seen it coming. If not the elected officials, then the professional administrators. And I really didn't get a chance to kind of push on that, particularly with Hammer and Gonzalez, the more recent mayors. Hayes and Mineta, it's too far back in history for them to have had much of an impact. And I also asked about whether we got our money's worth with redevelopment of downtown San Jose, and I think the answer is no. The city spent an awful lot, $1 or $2 billion on downtown, and I still don't think we've got a downtown. But they all said, oh yeah, we got our money's worth. It was all good. And I would have liked to be able to have time to push a little bit on that. So that was my disappointment, that with so many people and so little time, you really didn't need to get to do follow-up questions.
That does it for this edition of Equal Time. Check with us on Facebook and on our website, equaltimetv.wordpress.com. And from all of us here at San Jose State University and the School of Journalism and Mass Communications, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time for another edition of Equal Time.